host of the Fifth Column podcast, Michael Moynihan. He's co-host of the YouTube show and podcast Triggernometry and the author of An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, Konstantin Kisin. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Elon is had to go and save the world, and I think he will. Okay, here are the questions. Will Russia's bombing of Ukraine's capital city prompt a... oh, yeah. I saw that on the news today. Horrible. Saw it on CNN.
We're starting light, are we?
Yeah. Prompt a counteroffensive supported by Western allies.
No, the counteroffensive is coming anyway. It's nothing to do with the bombing. The Ukrainians have been planning this for a long time. They've been waiting for what they call Rasputitsa in that part of the world, which is mud season, to be over, and also training up their forces with Western weapons, tanks, etc. So the counteroffensive is coming. These bombings of the civilians, they're not... All they're doing is strengthening the resolve of the Ukrainians more than anything else, other than, of course, killing and maiming innocent people. So the counteroffensive is coming, but it's not because of that.
How does this war end?
Well, I've said from day one that I think the likely outcome is that Ukraine will make some territorial concessions, which will be Crimea and parts of the Donbass, and likely that will be in exchange for what Ukraine actually needs, which is long-term security. And in my opinion, there's no other way of providing it other than either NATO membership or UN peacekeepers on the border, but I don't think that's going to happen. So most likely, Ukraine has a successful counteroffensive, pushes Russia as far away as it can, and then makes a settlement that means that what happened in 2014, remember we talked about it earlier, when Crimea and parts of the Donbass were first taken, that can never happen again because Ukraine is now part of NATO and is therefore under the umbrella of that organization.
But you see Putin ever making concessions? I mean, we talk a lot in this country about how long Biden's going to last. Yeah. I keep reading that he's sick, Putin. Is that just a rumor? Do you have relatives in Russia?
I have relatives in both countries, but nobody really knows. I mean, I don't know if you know this. They take his poo in a bag, and it's kept separate from it. No one can analyze it. So the information isn't getting out. Let's put it that way.
How do you know that? So you're saying they take the Putin poo and put it in...
They keep it separate. When he goes abroad, they keep a hold of it.
Because... well, how could anybody get it? It goes down the toilet.
Maybe he shits in a bag. Maybe that's what we're discovering right now.
Okay, we're on CNN. You can't say bad words.
Oh, heard it here first.
It's not live there, is it?
Oh, no, but it's not edited either.
Oh, I forgot. Okay. This is new, the CNN thing. I don't know.
All right.
But on the Putin thing is the sickness we saw in those files that were leaked by that like 11-year-old kid in the National Guard in Massachusetts was the intelligence analysts say that he has cancer and his leg shakes all the time. And as far as concessions, I mean, the only way that most Ukrainians see this, and you know this from the polling of Ukrainians, they don't want to give up any territory.
Of course.
And the way that this ends is Russia loses. And he does pull out. You see that what happened in Kiev. I mean, they tried at the very beginning of this war to encircle Kiev and cut off the head of the snake, what they thought, and they were routed by an army that at that point didn't even have all the Western weapons that they have now. And these columns of tanks coming in and being picked off,
but plainly,
and they backed out. So.
But plainly, he could bomb Kiev much more than he has. That's what we were seeing on the news today.
Well, you know,
this apartment building, just pointless. Yeah. Well, not pointless if you're a terrorist, because that's
militarily pointless. Yeah.
Militarily pointless, except for the long-range goal of winning the war and making people just say "uncle," and that seems to be
terror bombing. I mean, the entire point of that. I mean, look, criticize it if you will. I mean, it's what we did in Germany in 1943, 44, and 45 was to bomb and say we were going to break. Well, publicly said this. Bomber Harris said we're going to break their spirit, and that's something that ended here now in 1945. The Russians are doing this today.
But that isn't what's happening on the ground. I remember on the first day of the war, I called up one of my friends in Kiev, and I said to him, "Listen, I've talked to some people. You need to get out." And he said to me, I still remember this conversation. He said, "This is different to 2014. We're not. This is our country. We're not leaving." And what is happening in Ukraine now with these bombings, it's only strengthening their resolve.
Well, they're brave people.
They are.
Incredible.
You know, with the bombing by Russia on Kiev and the continuing assault on Ukrainian sovereignty, you know, I know in the beginning, everybody was, for defend Ukraine, give them money, giving money. It was pleading. They didn't have anything. How do you know what the heck's going on? Okay, we're just out in we're out in own lives, okay, worrying about our own problems, our own situations, dealing with that. And here was the government makes a policy, says, we need to defend Ukraine. We've got to give them money. We've got to give them resources, give them armaments. It's the communists, if they take over. I mean, look what happened to the Obama monarchy back in 2014 when Russia came in with Putin, took a bite out of Crimea, took sovereign land from there, and the Obama monarchy did absolutely zero nada. They basically just let Putin walk all over them. Trump comes into office 4 years, okay, guess what happens? Putin, quiet, doesn't make a freaking move. Doesn't make a freaking move and test the resolve of someone who's never even been in politics. And then as soon as Biden comes in, kicks it right off once again, knowing full well that Biden isn't going to do anything other than give aid to the Ukrainians. And as far as I'm concerned, we gave them the money. That's all we need to give them. No more money to Ukraine. No more, to Zelensky. We need to keep that money home for ourselves. I've always said one thing, and we should be taking a look at foreign aid that we give to everybody, and no country is off the table. None. We first decide what we need to do to the United States of America, what we need help ourselves. We need that money for ourselves, and that is our money. That's our money that we've given to the government. The government didn't make that money. They stole that money in the form of taxes from people who worked hard to earn it. Government doesn't work hard. Government doesn't work. That's not their goddamn money. Yet they continue to give it. And we're borrowing the money. Anyways, we're borrowing the money from from other nations. We're in debt to Japan, in debt to China, we're in debt to so many places we're borrowing money from. And then we're printing the money too. It must be nice. But it has to stop at some time. And one of the things that I've said back in 2020, I ran for Congress on the Republican side here in North Carolina in the primary. And, first time ever, got about 8-9% of the vote. It was a nice thing just to put your foot inside there and see what you can do, get your voice out there, put your proposals out. And one of the things I proposed was that once we get to the point where we decide on what we're going to do with foreign aid, my thing basically is that if you decide to send foreign aid to another country, for every dollar you send out, you've got to earmark somehow $10 has to be spent in America. So if you're sending out $10 million to a country, $30 million, folks. I mean, $100 million needs to be spent in the United States of America. That should be an absolute freaking law, a bill that should be passed. Makes people think. Spending $1 someplace else, you got to spend $10 at home. Anyways, folks, this is what we have on tap for you today. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, and this is what we put on. We got Bill Maher with Konstantin Kisin, another guest inside there, talking about COVID, talking about, Russia, Crimea, all these things come clashing together. Let's get back to more of the interview with Bill and his guests right now.
Poll that puts Democratic presidential challenger RFK Jr., yes, if you hadn't gotten the news, Robert Kennedy Jr., the son of Robert Kennedy, our former Attorney General, at 19%. I saw that today, too. Can he hope to... I must say, I'm surprised that right off the bat, he's polling at 19%.
Kennedy name helps. 19%.
Kennedy name helps.
But another poll had him at 17%. So they seem to be in line in that, Marianne Williamson is at 9%. So you have a chunk of people, and when you talked about this in the mentions, 70% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run again, 50% of Democrats. There are people looking for alternatives, and I really wish it wasn't Robert Kennedy, but the DNC right now is, lining up the troops and going to prevent him from doing any damage. They're not going to have debates. There's not going to be no primary debates. He's just going to be pushed aside. If he's running as a Democrat, if he decides to then run as a third-party candidate, you have a Perot situation.
And why don't you like him?
Why don't
I mean, you said you wish it wasn't him. Why?
Yeah, I wish it wasn't him for a variety of reasons. I mean, Kennedy said something in 2013 that frequent guest on the show, Matt Welch, just tweeted about. Was he thinks that climate deniers should be put in jail. There should be regulations against people denying climate change. His past is checkered with this stuff. It's not just the vax stuff. I don't get into those issues. I don't know a ton about it. That's not my area of expertise at all. He said too many nice things about Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, as his brother Joe has too. It's just a very weird, and he's becoming more conspiratorial too. The sort of they are censoring me all the time. I just don't. You're a Kennedy. Your last book sold 2 million copies. No one's censoring you. So I don't like that kind of instinct. It's not my kind of
right. But
2 million people reading a book. What about the social media sites that were banning him? I mean, I'm not a time proponent of RFK either, but he does have some ideas, and they should be allowed into the community forum onto social media. But when you have YouTube and Facebook and others censoring, those are huge platforms to censor. And how many places was he invited to come on his book tour? Yeah, 2 million people out of 330 million people in the country, and 2 million people. He sold 2 million copies of his book. There is other forms of censoring. And I don't care who it is. We're intelligent enough to decide if that's somebody that we'd like to, hook our political wagon to and take us to the promised land. Who the heck is the government or these social media platforms to try to, shut him out? Yeah, those are private entities or whatever, but it's just a piss poor way of silencing debate from people that you're just afraid to hear their views because you're afraid that the views might take a hold and some people might be swayed by them. Yeah, and other people might, and a whole lot more people might say, yeah, the guy's a kook. He's a conspiracy nut. Let us decide for that if we think he's a conspiracy nut or not. I really don't know enough about the guy. I've seen some of his things. I could go, this isn't the time or place to go into, what he's for and what he's against. But, like you said, climate deniers. I mean, this Church of Climatology, we're supposed to listen to those morons, those idiots, those retards. That's my opinion. You could basically say, oh, we're going to censor you because you called them retarded. Hey, free country, buddy, free country. And they're not just retarded. They're stupid, idiotic, and moronic on top of it. They're a freaking religious cult. These people that are going around saying that climate change is going to bring about the extinction of the planet and mankind. That's conspiracy. That's crazy cuckoo. That's weird and wacko. Not the other way around. Anyways, let's continue.
But they won't treat what he is saying about COVID with.
No, of course not. No.
But they should.
Yes.
I mean, like many people who've written about COVID, including the U.S. government, they got a lot wrong. He might be getting stuff wrong.
Sure.
But he's not a nut.
Yeah, I mean,
he's not a nut, and he's not a nut about COVID either, or vaccines.
Well, the thing about this is that, it's hard to tell these days. It's hard to tell because you could get kicked off of Facebook, of YouTube, of all this stuff for saying that this came from a lab in Wuhan. Not from a wet market in Wuhan, but the lab that did bad viruses that was down the street. That got people, like lots of people, not just like a one errant person that was kicked off once. No, this was very, very common. That was all of these things that you couldn't say then, which are now conventional wisdom.
And what we know about medicine is always changing on a day-to-day basis. I mean, just last year, they got metabolism wrong.
Yes,
they
absolutely.
Came out with this big report that said we'd always thought it was slow down in age, and it doesn't slow in age. That's kind of a basic part of our health, and you can read stories like that.
Ulcers,
year to year.
depression, all those they got wrong.
Oh, it wasn't the serotonin. Okay, I'm not saying it's corrupt, although There is
Although,
quite a bit of that too. Somehow, when it's the Sackler family with the opioids, it's like, oh, see, corporations and pharmaceutical companies. But when it's COVID, oh no, they must have everything on the up and up. Okay, but say it's not mostly that. They were trying, and they did a great thing. They came up with a vaccine which most people needed, and have saved millions
under
of
the
lives.
Trump
That's true,
administration
too.
at warp
Robert
speed.
Kennedy may not agree with that, but I think that's true.
But we
your
have some
point is
problems with
entirely
that,
correct,
too.
Bill, which is I think a lot of people have forgotten how we got to be successful in the West, and part of that is freedom of speech and freedom of research, right?
Especially in science.
In science,
Especially in medicine.
we need people to be able
Yes.
to talk about the facts. And when you have some kid who works for Twitter in the Philippines censoring a Nobel Prize winning scientist in his speaking about his area of expertise, I think we've lost the plot.
Right.
So true, so true.
People were wearing T-shirts that said, "I believe in science." Science became this thing that was the conventional wisdom coming from the government, from the CDC. I believe in that. That's what they're talking about. You cannot believe in science. Science is a process.
Right.
Science is always
Exactly.
changing.
Right.
When people thought I could believe in science, they thought it never moved, and they were surprised when it
Right.
did.
And that's the thing. The left, the far paranoid COVID left, talks about science like it's religion. The science.
Yeah.
While they're doing things like wearing masks alone outside.
Yes.
The science.
Idiots, morons, and
What does the panel
retards.
think of Steven Spielberg saying he regretted replacing guns with walkie-talkies in E.T.? Yeah. He re-edited E.T., and now he's regretting that, and I'm so glad he is. He's saying
Another
movies
woke
were made at
retard
a
in
certain
Hollywood, a
time.
hypocrite.
They're all going to look weird in the future in some way. Leave them as they are. I think it's terrific.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah.
Putting disclaimers on
The really
movies
scary
now.
thing is that classic books, and I think this is what precipitated his comment on this, was Roald Dahl, who was a psycho and an anti-Semite, but
Right.
a good children's book author. And he has some pretty negative portrayals of people. It's not the Jews, he doesn't talk about it in the kids'
No.
book. And they changed the most banal thing.
Fat.
You literally
You can't say fat.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. What did they change it to? It was like nicely shapely. I don't know what it was. But
Body
they changed it. It's like
positive
body
is what they probably changed it to.
Yeah,
All right.
this kind of thing is insane, but they're actually changing books, and that is literally Orwellian, not the abuse of the word Orwellian.
We got to make way for commercials. We're here on CNN. Thank you again. We'll see you next week.
It's all these wokesters and hipsters in Hollywood going along with the crowd, changing movies, redoing them. Look what they did with the Bond movies now. Some of the other movies. I heard they were doing Planet of the Apes. Little House on the putting in these things inside there. Disclaimers that what you're about to watch was something that was accepted back in that time period. But we know that people are now, woke to that situation, that these things should never have been inserted. They never should have been done. We know better. What do you mean you know better? You don't know shit. You don't know crap. Don't make things up for me. Don't do me any freaking favors. You hypocrites. You wokesters. You people that are DEI, and DEI should go to die. DIE. I don't need no diversity. I don't need no equity. I don't need no inclusion. I don't need none of that. I certainly don't need anybody out in Hollywood or anybody else censoring movies, censoring books, because they think it's something that they don't like. Who gives a rip whether you like it or not? Just STFU and get the hell out of there. Get the hell out of the public domain and just stay at home, for crying out loud. All you people, just stay in your lane, for God's sake. Stay in your freaking lane and let me expand my lane to as many lanes as I want. Anyways, folks, you've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. You know what to do. Like, share, and follow us. Take a look at our other video links. Some of them are above and below. My final thought, as always, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.